Welcome to this short tutorial on how to use alpha textures in ZBrush using custom-made alphas from my 25 scale alpha pack, which you can purchase through the link in the description box below. Use coupon code MLWALPHA to get 20% off. Offer ends 23rd of June. You can also show your support further by donating a coffee on my Buy Me a Coffee page. Any donations will go towards bringing you more content in the future. If you enjoy my content, then please leave a like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel. So, without further ado, let's get into using alphas inside of ZBrush. So inside of ZBrush, I have a basic dinosaur or creature foot that I'm going to use to show you how to use the 25 scale alpha set that I created for my Killer Croc model that I published earlier last week. So it's a fairly simple process that I go through for this. You're going to need to download the 25 scale alpha pack, obviously, and then open it up inside of ZBrush when sculpting. Bearing in mind the scales that I created are a base template for positioning or putting down scales for your model, and you can go further on later on once you've placed all the scales and define those scales more using different brushes to pull, push or add more detail with. It's a time saver. It'll help you get something on a model that then you can go ahead and sculpt further. So with that being said, let's get into it. So for this tutorial, you'll need to have the standard brush, a drag rectangular. So if you click on the button, you'll see a bunch of brush strokes. We just want the drag rectangular for now. And then in the alphas, you want to import the alphas from the alpha pack. Now I've already imported 2 of these into my scene, but I will import another one to show you how to do so. So in the bottom, you want to click on the import button and then redirect yourself to the alphas that we're going to use. And so here they are. So we have the Photoshop scene, the preview in a sphere, and then the actual texture itself, or the alpha itself. So what you want to do is click on the alpha that you want to have in the actual alpha, not the preview or the Photoshop scene. So I'm going to do the scale number 8 and I'm just going to open that. And when you import it, it's going to plug it into this alpha channel here. And what you want to do is at the top where it says alphas, you want to click on that and then drag that channel or that tab into the left hand side. And once you've done that, it will look like this. And in here we can change or modify the alpha further. But for this tutorial, we just need to work with the surface button, which you can find near the bottom of the modify tab inside of the alpha tab. So we just want to click on turn on the surface button, and what that will do is set the mid-range of that alpha to the correct value for you, and each one of these has a different mid-range value. So once you've clicked on the surface button, you don't have to worry about finding the mid-range value of the alpha again. It'll just do it automatically for each alpha that you import in. So with that being said, let's place some of these scales on our model. So you want to set the intensity to anything that you feel happy with, or the amount of intensity you want out of the scale. So I'm just going to leave it at 20 and just quickly drag and drop and see how that looks. You can undo that and add some more intensity to it, so it's a bit more defined, and I'm just going to start placing some random scales with this big one for now. Like so. So you can see we would have to come back in here later and define some of these scales a bit more, but it's giving you a baseline to work with, and there's nothing worse than looking at a model and not knowing how to go further with it once you got into the stage of high detailing, or the detailing stage. So next I just picked scale 5, which was already imported in. So if you click on scale 5, you can then change the intensity again. And as you can see here, the mid value has changed to 41 from 35. That's because it's calculating the mid-range value of this alpha. So with that done, you can now click and drag this alpha all over the model where you want it. As you can see, there's going to need to be some tidy up around here, but that's okay. You can do that later with a standard brush or clay brush. And we're just going to import a new one, scale number 2. I'm just going to see what it looks like without changing the intensity. Maybe just change it slightly down. And you want to get a variety of different size scales on your model. You don't want to use the same scale in one particular place too often, because you're trying to show some sort of natural placement of these scales, and you need to be able to use a variety of scales for that. So I'm just gonna add a few down here. Right, and now I'm going to upload a new one, or import a new one, and I'm going to go for scale number 11, which is a smaller version of the big ones we just made. So this is pretty good for adding along here. So drag and drop where you want them. And as you can see, very quickly we can come up with the concept for a dinosaur foot without having to sit there for hours on end sculpting every single scale. And I've done that before, and it's a very arduous task. It does give you much better results because you're not overlapping on some of the scales. But if you're in a rush, or if you need to get something done quickly, it's okay to use alphas. Or if you want to set a baseline first for your character, it is okay to use alphas to do so. Next brush I want to use is going to be, where is it? Scale number 14. It's going to be a very small scale, set of scales, something like that. You might want to drop the intensity some more, and then just fill in those areas. And if you find that you're having artifacts going on here, it's because we forgot to put the back face culling on. So if you come over here to the brush tab, you go down to auto masking, you can change it to back face mask on, and that will make sure that no back faces will be sculpted on the other side. Especially when you're using a click and drag with alphas, it can get quite annoying when you see the artifacting going on the other side, or the sculpting going on the other side of your model where you don't want it. So just to be mindful that that button is there and use it when needed. So just quickly drag these smaller scales out. I'm not too worried about them overlapping because they're quite small scales, so you just need to maybe position them so they don't look too weird. There we go. And then what we can do now is go back into the alphas and import, and we can import a single scale. So these single scales are great for filling in gaps in your scales, basically scale placement. So say around here you can just, let's make that bigger or more intensity. So what you can do is you can just import a scale, a single scale, and fill in some of those areas like so, and try and blend it back. And if you have a part where it's quite cramped, you can just use a single scale, get in there and fill in those areas. You can build up those scales, and I'm just going to import another single scale. There we are. And you can just fill in some of these areas. Like so. You can even smooth out some of those overlaying ones. The key to using alphas is variety. You want to have a variety of different scales so that you don't have a pattern emerge. You want to kind of hide the pattern as much as possible. There we go. I'm just going to import a new one. Number scale 13. And add that here. Just put this intensity down quite a bit. So we're just going to fill in these areas here. so. Now that we have a baseline, we just use this again. Try to get that scale looking good, or as good as possible. So once we have a base for our scales, we can then go in with a dam standard. And this is where you will have to do a lot of sculpting to improve it, but at least you have that base to work on now. So you can come in here and using the dam standard, you can make some in between scales using the gaps that we have. I'm just doing this really quickly, but you can do it. Take your time with it. And cut in like this. And we can use a clay brush and just make those scales stand out a bit more. Even the ones we just sculpted, we'll use the alphas on. You can see we now have the chance to sculpt further. Go back to the standard brush, pull out this alpha, and just add some more scales in there somehow. Even mask off a big scale, and then add in a scale in there. Same on this side. Just mask off the area you don't want to affect, and then just add the scale over the top. Back to the dam standard, we can smooth out using the smooth brush, and cut in using the dam standard to add that detail in there. Further detailing your model. And this is what will take the most time to do. If you feel like you want to have more influence with the scales, you could put all these scales onto separate layers inside of ZBrush when you're sculpting, and then duplicate them to emphasize them more and to make the scales bigger in depth, so they're not so flat, and you have a bit more control of how big the scales are if you use layers. For this tutorial, or this quick tip tutorial, I am just going to show you a quick way of making and using these alphas to make quick geometry, quick detail, at which you can go further on later and sculpt further on. Or if it's a concept piece, have a bit of detail on, and like so. I would normally spend a couple of hours just detailing the foot, making sure that all the details can be seen. But for this, I'm just going to go a very quick pass over on the detail. Just going to use the standard brush again, but this time turn off the alpha, set it to freehand, turn off the lazy mouse by pressing L on the keyboard. Just come in here and add some depth to these bigger scales. They're not so flat. Just so. Just wrong here. Almost like they're overlapping, the scales are overlapping on the dinosaur's legs or feet. It does look a little bit weird right now, but I'm just going to show you how to fix some of that bulging. If you use the trend dynamic tool, you can come in, or the H polish tool even, and using Alt you can bring that sharpness back into the scales without such a softness to it. Like so. Go around the whole model and detail it further to your heart's content. Using the dynamic tool again, and just working around the model. Bring out the trim dynamic, fix some of those scales. There we go. And if you want, you can come back to the standard brush or the inflate brush. So if you press B and I and then go to N, you can get the inflate brush, and you can just inflate some of these scales so they're not all flat on the model. Especially the small ones, they're quite cool to have, especially when it comes to the texture inside. And once you're done with your scales and fixing all the little issues that you had when you placed them, you can come with the down standard and start adding some of those deep wrinkle or deep lines into the model to represent where a fold might be within the on top of the scales. So anywhere where there would be a bend to the model, so along the feet, where the toes are, is a typical place. Delete that one. So make this smaller. I mean, you could add the wrinkles before you add the alphas. Doesn't really matter too much how or which way you do it. You could have the whole model with all the wrinkles and the muscle tone completely done first, and then just stamp on some scales to your model. Define these big scales a bit further. There you go. So let's say that's done, and that only took us 29 minutes, half an hour to put some base sculpt alpha scales down for your model, and a quick tidy up, and we have this as a result. Now you can go further, obviously you can always go further and detail more and more and more, but this has just been a very quick overview of how to use the alphas inside of ZBrush. And I will show you how to, sorry, I keep getting distracted by this model. I just want to keep going and going and going. So I'm gonna stop it there now, and I'll show you how it looks when rendered. So if we come in here to a blend, and then come over to render, BPR shadows, set this to 30, move the light a bit, and then we add the ambient occlusion, set that to details to 4, resolution to 1000, blur down to 1, and then hit the BPR button and just let that render out. Not too bad. And there we go. So I hope this has been helpful. Like I said, it's just been a very quick overlook on how to use those alphas from Artstation. you can go a lot further, and I'm going to go further with this, the detailing stage, and just finish it off for you all, so you'll see the final result at the end. But this has been a very quick look at how to use those alphas. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, share, subscribe, and yeah, have a good weekend.